The sound of church bells and sirens echo across the capital of Burkina Faso, a small landlocked nation at the heart of Africa. For many Americans, the name may seem distant, yet its future is shaping the destiny of an entire continent. And today, the question is not only about Africa's survival, but also about the role of Black America in a story 4 centuries in the making. Imagine this: if African Americans, a community of over 50 million people, were counted as a nation, their combined economic power would rank among the world's top 10 economies. They hold immense cultural influence, political weight, and financial strength. But for too long, the bridge between them and Africa has been broken, marked by slavery, colonialism, and separation. Under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, a young and fiery president in Burkina Faso, that bridge is being rebuilt. He has called for the sons and daughters of Africa scattered across the world to return, not necessarily with their feet, but with their minds, their investments, and their solidarity. For viewers in the United States, especially those who lived through the civil rights era, this story may sound familiar. It is about justice denied and dignity reclaimed. When Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of a dream, it was not just for freedom at home, but also for a bond unbroken across the Atlantic. Today, Traoré's speeches echo that same spirit: sovereignty, independence, and unity. He insists that Africa cannot rise without its diaspora, and the diaspora cannot heal without Africa's embrace. This is not a theoretical debate. It is about real people. Take the example of Josephine, a grandmother in Ouagadougou, who struggles daily to feed her family because imported food prices have doubled. Or consider Michael, an African-American entrepreneur in Atlanta, who has been searching for ways to reconnect with his roots while building businesses that matter. Their lives, though oceans apart, are tied together by history and opportunity. But here lies the question that will define the rest of this century. Will Black America answer the call? Will this vast community, often overlooked in American politics, seize the chance to be the key to Africa's new revolution? If this question already stirs something in your heart, do not look away. Think about your family, your nation's security, and the possibility of a different world order. Stay with us, because what you are about to hear will challenge what you thought you knew about Africa, America, and the fragile balance between them. The central event that connects Black America to Africa's new revolution is unfolding in Burkina Faso under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. In a country long dependent on outside aid, Traoré announced what he called the new Pan-African Initiative. His words, broadcast across West Africa and streamed into diaspora communities worldwide, carried a message rarely heard from African presidents. Africa cannot stand alone. The children stolen from our land must know they are part of us, and we are part of them. To grasp the weight of this moment, it is important to understand the state of Burkina Faso today. More than 60% of its electricity is imported. Nearly half the population lives below the poverty line. Farmers like Amadou, who cultivates millet in the dry northern plains, rely on seasonal rains that no longer arrive when expected. Urban families in Ouagadougou endure frequent blackouts and soaring food prices. These hardships are real and persistent. Yet instead of turning to the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank for another cycle of loans and debt, Traoré turned his attention toward Harlem, Detroit, Atlanta, and Chicago, toward the heart of Black America. What does this look like in practice? In September, Burkina Faso's government launched a pilot project that allowed diaspora investors to directly fund solar grids in rural villages. Unlike earlier schemes dominated by European banks, this project is structured so that local communities retain majority ownership. In one village near Bobo Dioulasso, nearly 2,000 families gained reliable electricity for the first time. Children can now study at night under bright lights. Small businesses such as tailoring shops, welding workshops, and milling stations are able to run without interruption. For Josephine, a grandmother who once worried that her grandchildren would never see a better future, the change feels almost miraculous. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., a coalition of African American lawmakers publicly expressed their support for stronger ties with the Sahel. One congresswoman said, "This is not charity. This is about repairing a bond that history tried to erase." Across the southern United States, churches that have long served as the backbone of Black American life began discussing cultural and economic exchanges. Choir groups are preparing tours. Retired teachers are offering online lessons to students in Burkina Faso. Not everyone is enthusiastic. Inside Burkina Faso, some opposition figures warn that inviting diaspora investment might create new divisions or give wealthy outsiders too much influence. International analysts, particularly in France, dismiss the initiative as romantic politics that cannot withstand the hard realities of global trade. They argue that the established powers will never allow Burkina Faso to build an independent path without consequences. Yet something undeniable is happening in the streets. For the first time in years, young people in Ouagadougou talk about hope instead of exile. Instead of dreaming of Europe as their only chance for opportunity, they imagine bridges across the Atlantic. At a youth forum last month, one university student stood and declared, "If America once took us away in chains, maybe Black America can now help bring us back to dignity." And the hall erupted in applause, and many were moved to tears. The pivotal moment in this story is not defined by a single law or military decree. It is a shift in identity. It is the realization that the diaspora is not foreign. They are family. And when family unites, they can endure storms that once seemed impossible to survive. But this leaves us with an urgent question. If Black America truly holds the key, who will be the first to turn it? Who among the millions will choose to invest, to teach, and to connect? And who among the global powers that profit from Africa's weakness will attempt to block that door from opening? Stay with us, because the answer will lead us directly into the heart of the conflict. It is here, where dreams meet resistance, that the revolution will either gain wings or collapse under pressure. The turning point of this story came when Ibrahim Traoré delivered a speech that startled not only his own people, but also governments thousands of miles away. Standing before a crowd in Ouagadougou, he declared that Burkina Faso would no longer accept being treated as a pawn in global politics. With a raised fist and a steady voice, he called on Black America to join him in building a future no foreign power could control. His words were simple, yet carried the weight of centuries. Our dignity is not for sale. Our unity is not for negotiation. And our brothers and sisters across the ocean must know that Africa is their home. For many in Burkina Faso, this was the moment when a vague dream became a living reality. Crowds filled the streets, waving flags and chanting. Elderly men who had lived through coups and years of silence said they had never seen such energy. Young women carried banners with messages like, "Diaspora, "We need you," and "Africa belongs to Africans." The air was electric, and the feeling was not just political, but spiritual. People believed they were part of something larger than themselves. At the same time, reactions across the world were swift and divided. In the United States, African American community leaders welcomed the message. Some compared Traoré's call to the words of Malcolm X, who once spoke of the need for global solidarity. Civil rights veterans in Atlanta and Montgomery shared memories of the 1960s and said they finally saw a leader in Africa speaking directly to their hearts. In cities like New York and Chicago, local radio stations invited callers to discuss whether Black Americans should consider investing, visiting, or even relocating to Africa. For the first time in a generation, Africa was not just a story of poverty or war. It was a story of possibility. But in Paris, the French government expressed open concern. Officials warned that Burkina Faso was turning its back on historic partnerships. French media outlets labeled Traoré a dangerous radical. European analysts insisted that if diaspora investment bypassed Western banks, it would destabilize financial systems long tied to Africa's resources. In Washington, some voices in the security community raised alarms, asking whether a new Africa diaspora alliance could shift global alliances in ways unfavorable to American interests. Inside Burkina Faso itself, opposition leaders accused Traoré of risking the nation's stability. They feared that by challenging powerful interests abroad and inviting diaspora involvement, he might provoke economic sanctions or even covert action. Yet the streets told a different story. People who once hesitated to speak now shouted with pride. A market vendor named Awa told a local journalist, "For the first time, I feel like my children's lives will not be decided in Paris or Washington, but here, with us, and with our family abroad." Her testimony spread quickly across social media, drawing both praise and criticism. The climax of this moment was not limited to speeches and headlines. It was felt in the quiet corners of homes where parents told their children that history was turning. It was felt in churches where pastors linked biblical stories of liberation to Africa's struggle for dignity. It was felt in American living rooms where older men and women who had marched with Martin Luther King Jr. watched the news from Burkina Faso and whispered that the dream was still alive, only now with a new voice carrying it forward. And yet, with every rising wave of hope, an equal wave of fear followed. Could Burkina Faso survive the economic pressure that might come? Would foreign powers attempt to isolate the country or even destabilize its government? Would Black America truly answer the call? Or would the distance of time and place prove too great to overcome? This is the crossroad where possibility meets risk. Traoré's challenge has created momentum, but it has also triggered resistance. The people are energized, but the powers that oppose them are preparing their response. Which side will prevail? Will the spirit of unity carry Africa and its diaspora into a new chapter? Or will the backlash crush the dream before it can take root? Stay with us, because the next step in this story will reveal how this revolution impacts ordinary families, both in Burkina Faso and in the United States. The bold declarations and emotional rallies in Burkina Faso did not remain abstract ideas. They quickly began to shape the daily lives of ordinary people and the political landscape of the nation. For families across the country, the immediate effect was a surge of pride and hope. Parents who once whispered about leaving the country now spoke to their children about staying and building a future at home. In villages that received diaspora-funded solar grids, children could study after sunset, and farmers could keep their harvests in cold storage for the first time. These small but tangible changes made the dream of self-reliance feel real. At the same time, the government of Ibrahim Traoré faced mounting pressure. Inside Parliament, debates grew heated. Supporters praised the new Pan-African initiative as a revolutionary step that could finally free Burkina Faso from dependency. Opponents warned of dangerous consequences if international partners retaliated. Some accused Traoré of gambling with the nation's survival, arguing that Burkina Faso could not withstand isolation if aid was cut or if sanctions were imposed. These fears were not unfounded. History across Africa is full of examples where governments that defied global powers faced swift punishment. For ordinary citizens, the uncertainty created both excitement and anxiety. A schoolteacher in Ouagadougou explained, "I am proud of our president's courage. But I worry what will happen if foreign aid disappears. My salary is already low. How will our schools survive?" Her concerns reflect the tension between long-term sovereignty and short-term survival. On the streets, protests and counter-protests erupted. Young activists rallied in support of Traoré, carrying signs that read, "No more chains," and "Diaspora, welcome home." Meanwhile, opposition supporters gathered outside government buildings, demanding guarantees that Burkina Faso would not be dragged into unnecessary conflict. The political temperature rose, and families began to fear that divisions could escalate into violence if not carefully managed. Religious leaders stepped in to calm the situation. Imams in mosques and pastors in churches urged patience, unity, and prayer. They reminded the people that every great change comes with trials. Their voices carried weight in a nation where faith remains central to daily life. Still, the anxiety lingered. Beyond the borders of Burkina Faso, regional politics also shifted. Neighboring countries watched closely. Leaders in Mali and Niger, already sympathetic to Traoré's defiance of external control, expressed quiet support. They saw in his alliance with the diaspora a model that could strengthen the entire Sahel region. But other governments, fearful of angering Western donors, kept their distance. This division created new diplomatic tensions inside the African Union, where debates over sovereignty and dependency grew sharper. The civil consequences were also personal. Families with relatives in the United States or Europe began reaching out more actively. Phone calls between Atlanta and Ouagadougou increased. Letters and emails carried new conversations about business, education, and faith. A grandmother in Burkina Faso proudly showed her neighbors a video message from her grandson in Chicago, promising to visit for the first time in his life. These human connections transformed political slogans into lived experience. Yet behind every hopeful story, darker questions remained. Could the fragile economy withstand even a short disruption of foreign imports? What if food and fuel prices climbed higher? Would ordinary citizens, so full of enthusiasm today, turn against their leaders tomorrow if hardship deepened? Political scientists warned that revolutions often fail not because of lack of vision, but because of unmet daily needs. This is the civil and political battlefield of Burkina Faso today. A nation caught between fear and hope, between dependency and dignity. For the elderly, who remember decades of broken promises, the uncertainty is exhausting. For the young, who crave a future that belongs to them, the risk feels worth taking. But what about the United States? How will Washington respond as this new alliance between Africa and its diaspora grows stronger? And what will America's stance mean for the future of stability in the Sahel? Stay with us, because the answers from across the ocean could either strengthen this fragile hope or bring it crashing down. As the world watched events in Burkina Faso unfold, the United States could not remain silent. In Washington, officials from the State Department and the Pentagon quietly debated what Traoré's new Pan-African vision might mean for American interests. Publicly, spokespeople expressed cautious words about monitoring the situation and encouraging regional stability. Yet behind closed doors, analysts raised harder questions. Would a united front between Africa and Black America shift alliances away from the West? Could such a movement reduce U.S. influence in one of the most strategically important regions of the world? For many Americans, especially those who lived through the Cold War, these questions echo familiar concerns. The Sahel has become a front line in the fight against terrorism, migration crises, and growing Russian and Chinese influence. Any major shift in Burkina Faso's orientation has direct consequences for American national security. If diaspora communities in the United States begin to support projects that bypass traditional Western banks and institutions, the impact could ripple through the global financial system. Meanwhile, Europe watched with unease. France, once the dominant power in Burkina Faso, viewed Traoré's defiance as a personal challenge to its long-standing influence. European Union officials warned of instability if diaspora-driven projects were allowed to grow unchecked. In contrast, Russia and China signaled quiet interest, hinting at potential cooperation with Burkina Faso if relations with the West deteriorated. For Black American leaders and activists, the development sparked new conversations. Some saw it as a long-awaited opportunity to reconnect with Africa and build bridges that honor shared history. Others worried that becoming too involved could invite backlash from powerful interests in Washington or foreign capitals. Across American cities, churches and community organizations began hosting forums titled Africa and Us, drawing seniors who remembered the civil rights movement and young people eager to rediscover their roots. The world now stands at a moment of uncertainty. Will the United States treat this new Africa diaspora connection as a threat or as an opportunity for partnership? Will Washington view Traoré as a dangerous radical or as a partner in building stability and dignity? The answer could shape not only the future of Burkina Faso, but also the balance of global power. But what if this fragile hope collapses under pressure? What if foreign interference, economic sanctions, or internal divisions tear apart the very movement that now inspires millions? Stay with us, because in the next and final part, we will explore the warnings, the possible futures, and the choices that lie ahead. Burkina Faso today stands at a crossroads. On one side lies the promise of dignity, independence, and unity with its brothers and sisters across the ocean. On the other side lies the shadow of retaliation, sanctions, and the risk of isolation. The stakes could not be higher. If the fragile alliance between Africa and Black America holds, it could rewrite the rules of power not only in the Sahel, but across the globe. If it collapses, the disappointment could deepen old wounds and leave millions more vulnerable to poverty and despair. History teaches us that every great movement faces resistance. The civil rights struggle in America did not advance without sacrifice. The fight against colonialism in Africa was not won without hardship. Today, Families in Ouagadougou and families in Chicago share a new question. Can this partnership survive the storms that are certain to come? The warnings are clear. If the Pan-African Initiative fails, Burkina Faso could face higher food prices, fuel shortages, and pressure from powerful nations determined to keep control. If the alliance succeeds, it could inspire other African nations and diaspora communities to follow, creating a chain reaction that reshapes global politics. This is why the next few months will be critical. Analysts warn that if a solid African diaspora economic framework is not established soon, the window of opportunity may close. But beyond politics and economics, this is about people. It is about a grandmother in Burkina Faso who prays that her grandchildren will grow up in a land of dignity. It is about an American veteran of the civil rights movement who wonders if the struggle of his youth is now finding new life in Africa's awakening. And it is about you, listening now, asking yourself where you stand in this story. So we leave you with this question. Is Ibrahim Traoré a symbol of reckless defiance, or is he the torchbearer of a new revolution? If this story has touched your heart, reflect on it, share it, and let your voice be part of the larger conversation. If you believe in justice, dignity, and the possibility of a new beginning for Africa and its diaspora, let that belief guide your actions. As you think on this, remember the words of Scripture that echo across both America and Africa. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. May peace, dignity, and strength guide this fragile movement. And may God bless Africa, the land of resilience, hope, and unyielding spirit.